it might be actually a bigger thing. It might be that you have to connect that back to your purpose. And so you can create a sort of an artificial reward to say, look, actually, when I've done this big thing, however difficult it was, I can really go tick, it's done. It's off my list.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Ricky from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Paul from Thinking Focus.
The question is the pandemic an excuse to put stuff off?
The question is from Thinking Focus, a podcast about how we sometimes get in our own way and what we can do about it.
Why? What are you trying to tell me? Yeah, so joking aside.
Where's the list?
Yeah, just checking. I think you're right. I think, clearly it's a pandemic and it's a crisis. And like any change, there are things that can't be done now that have to wait till later. But also, I like this idea of thinking of big kind of future things. And I don't think it's the pandemic, actually. I think it's the return to normal has become like a psychological parking zone where people can quite easily justify to themselves that I can't do this right now. It has to go into this space over here called normal. A classic example of this is looking at an issue and going, well, we're not all in the office. I can't do that till we return to the office. And you have to kind of ask yourself, well, is that true? Or what you're really saying is, I'd rather not do that now until we return to being back in the office.
And of course, I imagine that, there's clearly some real reasons why stuff can't be done. And that might be financial considerations, performance may well have dipped for a lot of organizations. Clearly for others, it's kicked on and accelerated beyond, anything they expected, which of course causes its own problems. But the reality is, how as leaders do we then differentiate between those that are genuinely real issues that we can't deal with right now versus actually we have kind of psychologically parked that as you eloquently described it?
So I think you can look at the issue and go, it's going to fall in one or two camps. There is either some series of obstacles or constraints or reasons that mean you have to defer this decision till later. So like you say, it could be financial, it could be, resource constraint. It could be just, right now of the 10 things we need to do, this used to be number one. It's now number 10 because 9 others have been created by the current circumstances. That's all fine. What I'm really talking about are the ones where you get to a slightly different answer, where the kind of constraint that you're putting up is something around it's kind of difficult or it's challenging or it's hard. So let me give you an example. There's going to be a number of people issues that were existing in a business before the pandemic happened, before lockdown happened, before everybody went home, that are probably still existing in the business that a leader needs to tackle and resolve. It's really easy to go, that's going to be really tough to do on video calls and conference calls and scheduled meetings. I need to sit down and look them in the eye and do it face to face. Now, that's cool if this was a week or a fortnight.
But we're 3 months in now.
We're 3 months in now. And let's be really honest, right? You and I are talking, it's June. This could easily be, for a lot of people, working at home till Christmas. In fact, for some of us, this might be a new normal, actually going back into the office in the way we used to work, just maybe a long way away. So we're kind of putting these issues off into kind of, I think as people would say, into the long grass. We're parking them in the future. And this is not really a justification. This is procrastination. This is a deferral of the issue. And procrastination, I find it's one of those issues people really misunderstand because people think it's about time management. People think, well, look, if you're procrastinating, you just need to organize your day better. Procrastination psychologically has nothing to do with time management. They are completely separate subjects. Procrastination is about emotional management. It's about managing the emotional state. Because what your brain is doing, because I think you know me, I love brains. I think they're amazing, incredible things. But at the same time, they are really stupid sometimes. So your brain is trying to protect you. Its primary job is to try and protect you. And what it's doing is it's protecting you from current pain, even though it may be creating future pain. because it's not looking at the whole thing holistically and going, well, if I don't do that now, actually by the time we get out of lockdown, all these bad things will have happened and I'll have to deal with this and that and dissatisfied stuff. It's just going, that's a really tough conversation. You don't want to have that conversation. It's going to be really unpleasant. You don't need to do it today. Stick it down the road. It will be fine. Just don't do it right now. That's what your brain's doing. So it's this balance between pain now, pain tomorrow.
So there's a name for that, isn't there? Is it discounting?
Well, there's two sides to it. So there's time inconsistency. So
Right.
so time inconsistency is basically going, I'll make plans for future self, the guy in the future, tomorrow me, he can worry about all this. I'll make plans for him. But today me, he's not a planner, he's an action taker. So I'll make the plans for future self. He'll go and have the difficult conversation. And today self can watch YouTube.
Yeah.
Because that's quite nice. Yeah. So that's time inconsistency. On top of that, the bit you were mentioning is the fact that we discount risk and reward it over time. So we what we do is we take the pain related to the conversation right now. I need to phone this person and have quite a tough conversation. That's emotionally quite difficult. So let's scale that. That's a 10 out of 10. Yeah. If I put this off, yes, it's going to cause a 20 out of 10 problem 6 months down the line, but that's 6 months away. So we'll put an 80% discount on that. All right, that's great. That's 4 out of 10. I hope I got my maths right there. Really dangerous doing maths on the fly. So that's a 4 out of 10. So clearly that 20 out of 10 problem in the future is less risky than the current today. So we discount over time. It's the reason why we're bad at losing weight and saving money for pensions and lots of other kind of things. Economists talk about it quite a lot. But that's kind of the balance that's playing off here because the doing it in the future, the planning for the future self to go and resolve this problem later on just feels easier and simpler than the pain and the effort required to go and tackle the problem right now.
And I can relate to that. I mean, there are clearly things that are uncomfortable. I think back to, early management days. The difficult conversation was always one that could wait till next week.
Yeah.
And next week becomes next month. Before you know it, your boss is going, have you resolved that? And you're going, well, it just wasn't quite right. I needed to have more information. I needed this. And what I'm doing essentially is building a set of excuses to justify the fact that I just need to step up and do it.
Yeah, but it's painful and you're trying to save yourself. You're trying to protect yourself from that short-term pain, that short-term harm of going in the room and having a tough conversation. I mean, the sort of the best example I can give from myself is when I start writing. So we write blogs. If I write the blog, I will sit down, I'll have a great idea, I'll probably walk the dog, I'll come back, I know exactly what I want to write. And then I start sitting down and my brain will go, yeah, but do you really know this? And are you any good as a writer? And have you got this right? And what if it's not quite right? And before you know it, I'm a sentence in and I'm stuck because now I'm going huge amounts of pain now, write this article. No pain in the future. I can write it in the future. That'll be fine. We didn't need a blog this week anyway. What am I worried about? And so you get that balance. And the same is true in management conversations. Confronting somebody or tackling something difficult or sorting out a structural issue involving people is always going to be emotive and painful at the point you do it. And so we kind of throw it into the future, discount it down, and tell future self it's got to do that. Current self doesn't want the pain, doesn't want the trouble, doesn't want the grief.
So what can people do then, Paul, to focus more, in essence, not procrastinate, not hold things over, not delay things? What practically can they do about this?
Okay, so there's a number of solutions that you can take to basically stop procrastination. These are all kind of procrastination solutions generally, because what we're seeing, and I think you and I have both seen this recently when we're talking to people in business, that this excuse, this distant thing has made it really easy to procrastinate, because putting stuff off till tomorrow is one thing, but actually putting it to a place where we go, and I've got a reason, that's a really different whole ball game.
Sure.
Because it's just too easy. So first thing we can do is look at how do we create rewards for doing it now? So how can we make the pain less significant for doing it now or the reward greater? So that's the first thing.
What would that look like?
Well, I mean, it's, you can kind of go, for me, writing a blog, it might be, look, if I just write a couple of paragraphs, then I can go and have some ice cream, or I can go and do something fun, or I can then watch the YouTube video. And that's a classic one. With a difficult conversation, it might be actually a bigger thing. It might be that you have to connect that back to your purpose. And so you can create a sort of an artificial reward to say, look, actually, when I've done this big thing, however difficult it was, I can really go tick, it's done. It's off my list. And I'll come back to that because the list is quite important. The other side to that is you can just increase the consequences. So you can just sit and imagine and think about and explain to future self why current self has to do this, because it will be really bad. So if you bear in mind this discounting thing, if you can build up the pain to future self to a point that even after the discount's applied, it still makes more sense to do it now, you'll do it now. So I guess what I'm saying here is how often do we sit down and go, well, okay, what are the real consequences of not taking that action or not doing this thing, not dealing with that situation or problem? What is it that's really going to happen? And what will that mean for me personally? So if I don't tackle that person issue, or if I don't tackle that structure issue, what does that mean?
So I imagine, given what you said earlier about the propensity of our brains to protect us and trick us, actually having a foil, somebody you can bounce off, that potentially can ask you some of these challenging questions might be helpful as well.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, what you've just describing is why coaching works. Because what the coach is doing is basically sitting there with a giant you mirror going, I'm not going to allow you to lie to yourself in the way that we do on a daily basis, because our brains do that to protect us. So the coach is, in a nice, gentle way, hopefully, prodding us and getting us to kind of come to terms with, actually, the consequences of the future thing are probably more serious and bigger, and therefore we need to take action. A couple other things you can do. One of the ones, I call it creating smaller hurdles. So, sometimes the things that we're putting off just because they feel so big. And therefore, actually what we need to do is make them feel smaller. And the way to make them feel smaller is to break it into chunks. So, as the old proverb says, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. If you look at the whole elephant, that's one hell of a meal. If you look at a piece of an elephant, maybe you can handle that. So that kind of breaking it into smaller chunks is a really good thing. The other thing you can do, and it's really about designing behavior, is this idea of making a future commitment to action. So let me give you an example of that in this example of putting off a difficult conversation. Schedule a meeting, but don't schedule it for today. Schedule it for next week, because it will feel much easier to put the meeting next week than today. Your brain will go, well, that's not pain today. I'm quite happy to let you do that. But now you've got a commitment to action. So you've committed to actually having that meeting. When you get to it, now you're balancing off the pain of having the meeting as opposed to the pain of cancelling the meeting and explaining to everybody why you didn't do it. So you're more likely to do it. And it works in the same way as if you want to start running, get your gym kit ready the night before, because if you get up in the morning and have to root around all the drawers to find all the clothes, you're more likely to go, you're going to say no. But if you've got it there by the door, guilting you out to go running, you're more likely to say yes. The last one, just to think about, is an idea of going, give yourself less chances to procrastinate with real stuff. So one of the things that we do is have enormous to-do lists. And most people go down those enormous to-do lists and go, that can wait. Oh, that's tough. Oh, I like doing that. Right, I'm going to start with that one. Yeah. So we cherry pick on the to-do list.
And we see those as our quick wins as well, don't we?
Yeah.
We justify that one is the right one to choose because actually if I can get 4 or 5 things off the list today, then I've made some real momentum. And so there's a different school of thought that says, okay, every day, go into every day with a really short list of things that are really important, that are going to progress your bigger goals. And put constraints on the list. So it's 5 or it's 6 things. Today, I'm going to focus on these 6 things. Now, that does 2 things. Well, firstly, it makes you look at the list and go, what really needs to be done? Okay.
And secondly, it's giving you less chance to procrastinate, because you're going, there's 6 things here. Chances are, if I found 6 things off a big to-do list, they're all fairly tough, and I can't do anything that's not on the list. So I'm forcing myself to say I'm going to do number 1 on the list, and I'm going to stick with that until it's done to a point where I can do no more, and then I'll do number 2 on the list.
Okay.
So it reduces the ability to go, I'll leave this to later.
Which I imagine is not always easy when you're working in a busy environment, or you're working for a demanding set of colleagues or boss, or you're a cog that's in the middle of a complex system that, work comes in and work goes out. And, sometimes actually finding time to do this important stuff is not always easy for some.
Yeah. So an alternative to the sort of 5 or 6 thing list that is used quite a lot is something that, this is actually how I do it myself. And this was taught to me by one of my bosses many years ago, which is kind of have 3 things on the list and accept that most of your time is going to be at the beck and call of other people because you work in a large organization.
That's probably more appropriate for most then.
So know what your 2 or 3 core priorities are and work really hard to progress those, accepting that you are going to get bounced around the system quite a lot, and you are going to get called in to do reports and presentations and meetings that you weren't expecting and take phone calls all of a sudden. All of that's going to still happen. But every day go, am I progressing my 1, 2, and 3 priorities? And don't add anything to the list until you can literally cross something off the list. So until something on that 3 has gone, yes, it's done, I can now say I'm no longer working on that. Nothing else can get on the list. And you may occasionally have to kind of look at it all and go, right, I need to rebalance my priorities. But it kind of genuinely works.
But I suppose there's an element of Warren Buffett's approach in that, where he basically goes, list your top 25 and discard the bottom 20 because they're the ones that are going to stop you doing the ones that are really important, which is your top 5.
Yes. And it's it comes back down to one of the big things that stops us procrastinating, one of the big things that stops us throwing things into the long grass is focus. It's having really small chunks of focus on a few things that we progress and, direct our attention to. And the bigger the list, the longer the list, the more options you have, the more likely it is your brain is going to look down the list and go, yeah, I like that one. That protects me quite nicely right now today. I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's summarize this then. So what we're really saying is beware your brain. Whilst it's trying to help you, actually, in reality, in today's world, it's probably working against you, achieving the things that are important.
The today's world bit's really interesting because we're running around with a piece of machinery or a piece of software or however you want to think of it that's just not designed for meetings and, commuting and the way we live today. It was designed for a much simpler life. So it will protect you from succeeding on a regular basis.
So it's not quite caught up yet with today's world.
No.
Okay. And we just need to be aware about this discounting the risk over time, and perhaps even look to counter some of those things with increasing rewards for doing things, for acting sooner rather than delaying. Work on the consequences element. So if I don't do this, what happens? So, you quite interestingly said it's going to become a 20 out of 10 if I leave it for 6 months or even a couple of weeks. It depends on what it is, but actually let's raise that perception of consequence and maybe even tap into a trusted a foil, an advisor, even a coach, as you described it, somebody who's going to hold the mirror up and go, really? Is this the right thing right now? Are you making the right call on this, or are you just kidding yourselves and delaying it? In essence, are we making excuses? And let's look for how do we create these future behaviors, looking at these commitments to action and perhaps even, chunking things down and focusing on these smaller priority lists. Let's not try and eat the elephant all today. Let's pick off the first 3 bites or the first 5 bites, whichever works for you. The nature of your work will determine what is right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And of course, celebrate the wins when you do that. So when you get through them, celebrate the win of achieving that. Not necessarily the goal itself, because if you're having some people issues or some structure reorganizational elements, you're not celebrating that. You're celebrating the fact that internally that you've achieved what was on your list, essentially.
Absolutely. And that's a really important part of this, just to round off that celebrating the win and celebrating the win of not putting it off. Celebrating that I did it. I was scared. It was scary. It was difficult. I knew it was hard and I did it. Creates, again, an attitude for future behavior. Because the more times we go, that's really difficult, I don't want to do it, the more time, the more chances next time we come to that situation, we're going to repeat that behavior.
So the question really is for our listeners, what are you putting off that you really should be getting a grip of?
Yeah. Especially as this might not be going away very soon.
Okay.
So there are things we've got to deal with now.
Okay, Paul, thank you for that.
Thanks, Ricky.
Thinking Focus works with teams and business units in organizations around the world, helping them achieve breakthroughs by enabling them to think differently. To find out more about our work and how we could help your organization, go to www.thinkingfocus.com.